Can I please talk about the My Chemical Romance to Twilight pipeline connection, also known as the September 11th to Ellen DeGeneres getting canceled pipeline? For you, I absolutely can, and I will deep dive this with receipts, but what I'm going to have to do, unfortunately for a lot of people, is debunk it because this isn't quite true. Basically, the first domino is September 11th because the events of September 11th inspired Gerard Way to start the band My Chemical Romance. And then supposedly My Chemical Romance inspires Stephenie Meyer to write the Twilight saga in 2005. Now, this is the part that is incorrect because that's not really true. A lot of people even think to this day that Twilight was Gerard Way fanfiction. It was not, and I will get into that and explain why that is not true later. But as the alleged pipeline goes, Stephenie Meyer writes the Twilight saga. The Twilight saga results in 50 Shades of Grey, which was Twilight fanfiction. Now, that is 100% true. 50 Shades of Grey was originally a very popular Bella and Edward fanfiction called Master of the Universe, and E.L. James used to go by the name Snow Queen's Ice Dragon. It was so popular that she got a book deal from it, and the characters and plot were slightly changed so that it could be published. The books were so successful that they were picked up to be a film series starring Dakota Johnson. Dakota Johnson becomes very famous as a result of this movie trilogy, and she's on Ellen, calls her out for claiming that she didn't invite her to her birthday party when she did invite her to her birthday party, and this kind of catapults all the Ellen criticism, which leads to Ellen being canceled. To add to this, the official birth date of Little Resentment Cullen, Bella and Edward's weird little demon kid, is listed as September 11th, and many people believe this must be Stephenie Meyer harkening back once again to My Chemical Romance. Now, the holes in this pipeline lie in the My Chemical Romance inspires Stephenie Meyer to write Twilight part, because that's not really true in the way people think it was. There is really no evidence or anything to indicate that Twilight was an MCR fanfic or anything like that. Stephenie has stuck to the exact same story of how she got the inspiration for Twilight since the very beginning, and she talks about how she woke up on June 2nd from a very vivid dream of two people sitting in a meadow, a girl and a sparkly vampire, and they're falling in love and talking about how they're having a difficult time with their relationship and how he's so attracted to her blood. So basically the meadow scene from Twilight. And she talks about this. She has never changed this story. Now, some people for some reason thought that this dream was about Gerard Way. She never said that, and she actually never mentioned Gerard Way himself. Stephenie's face cast for Edward has always been Henry Cavill. If you were around before the movies, you know she used to talk about this on her website all the time, particularly Henry in The Count of Monte Cristo. So much so to the point where she made these book covers for her books, like before they got published, where she literally put Henry Cavill's face on them. This is still on her website. So if anybody was in that dream and it wasn't just a random vampire, I would say the best guess is it was probably Henry Cavill. That's not to say that there isn't a connection between MCR and Twilight, because there is, and Stephenie has mentioned them, just not in the way people think. Stephenie did mention MCR a few times, but it was never like their music inspired this series. She's actually talked about how MCR inspired some of her writing for Jacob. She said, "This band is so in touch for me with Jacob's character, this really raw, uncontrolled emotion where it's not about some person who's grown up and calloused and learned how to control things. It's someone who's feeling it for the first time and just wants to go out and blow things up." The song Famous Last Words is a really romantic version of Jacob saying, "Okay, I'm putting myself out there and you're probably going to break me, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm still going to make the offer." The only other time she has talked about MCR is there's this really fun section in the illustrated guide where she lists like musical influences that she used and scenes that they're connected to. And again, this is about Jacob, and she lists Sleep and This Is How I Disappear for that scene in the epilogue of Eclipse where Jacob gets the wedding invitation and then he wolfs out and runs away. Now, MCR is one of many musical influences that Stephenie lists in this section, and the one that she lists the most is Muse. If there's any band Stephenie has talked about inspiring the series as a whole, it's definitely Muse. She literally thanks Muse in the dedications of the books. And while she obviously was inspired by MCR with some of Jacob's writing, Jacob is a character that became significant much later on in the writing process. You may or may not know this, but in the original drafts of Twilight, Jacob was a much less significant character, and Jacob and Bella are not best friends and they don't fall in love, and she was encouraged to expand Jacob by her editors. So definitely not something that inspired the series as a whole, but MCR does have another connection to Twilight. The band was famously asked to do a song for New Moon, and they turned it down publicly and said that they weren't interested and they had moved on. This was in 2009, and they actually wrote a reaction song to this called Vampire Money. And this is apparently like a campy kind of response to that whole situation and the hype of Twilight in general. Now, of course, we're never really going to know if Stephanie was secretly writing Gerard Way self-insert fanfiction. I don't think there's anything in the text or anything Stephanie has ever said to suggest that. So while there is a connection, this pipeline isn't really provably accurate in the way people think it is. Now, as far as Rasputin's birthday being on September 11th, I think this really just has more to do with the fact that Stephanie wanted Bella to wake up as a vampire on her birthday, because that's what happens. Because if you look at the text of Breaking Dawn, it actually suggests that Rumor Monger was born sometime on September 10th. But she does list her official birthday as September 11th, so that was obviously intentional. So you can come to your own conclusions about that. But yeah, this pipeline is not exactly accurate.